Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today with Brad Simpson of Simpson Limited because he is the Luger guy. And today we're taking a look at a very specific Luger that I think has a pretty cool history to it. This is an Abercrombie & Fitch marked Luger. So I guess people probably don't know that Abercrombie & Fitch made Lugers.
They didn't actually make them, but they had them made. They had 100 made for their stores.
So when you say their stores, this is the original Abercrombie & Fitch. Today, they're best known, I think, for obnoxious, overpriced t-shirts.
Correct.
But Abercrombie & Fitch originated in 1892 as a sporting goods store in New York City, and it was certainly not a household name, but it was a pretty good sporting goods store. I mean, it had a serious clientele. You had guys like John Steinbeck and Theodore Roosevelt shopping at Abercrombie & Fitch for actual sporting, outdoor, safari, or, serious sporting goods.
Right. If you were going to go on safari, that is where you went to get your stuff.
Exactly. And so they sold quite a lot of guns, including Lugers.
Yep.
So what I find, that there's, I think, just a really cool story behind these things. They wanted 100 Lugers, and they wanted a 50-50 split. Half of them in 30 Luger, or 7.65 Parabellum, and half of them in 9mm Parabellum. And this was 1922, and so in 1922, there was one company, or actually one guy, who had the sole rights to distribute DWM pistols in the U.S., and that was Stoeger, a company that's still around today, in fact.
Yep.
And so Abercrombie attempted to buy guns through Stoeger, as you would expect to. But they couldn't provide the guns that Abercrombie wanted, because they wanted 120mm barrels. These are like 4 5/8 inch barrels. And at this time, the Versailles Treaty was kicking into force, and anything longer than a 100mm barrel in Germany was being considered a military arm, and the Versailles Treaty prohibited DWM from manufacturing them. So what did they do instead? Well, obviously, Abercrombie wasn't able to get these through Stoeger, so they found kind of a workaround, right?
Right. They had the guns and the frames made in Germany by DWM in the white. And then Hämmerli in Switzerland made the barrels. And they were actually finished in Switzerland also.
So this is actually kind of like what's going on, or what was going on with the assault weapons ban, or import into the U.S. of 2-inch barreled revolvers, where you have to ship them in one format, and then once they're in the country, you can paint them back to the way that you want them.
Right.
What's the solution if we can't buy long barrels? Well, we'll buy guns with no barrels, and then put our own barrels on.
Correct.
So in this way, they were getting a gun that was both DWM and Hämmerli.
Correct.
So pretty cool second name to it. So what really makes these distinguishable at first is that they're actually marked on the barrel Abercrombie & Fitch, New York.
Correct, across the top of the barrel.
And with only 100 made, and with what is now a real household name, these things are highly subject to fakery, aren't they?
Yep, it doesn't take much to engrave Abercrombie & Fitch on the top of a barrel.
And increase the price by what sort of margin?
Take a $2,500 gun and turn it into a $12,500 gun.
It's a nice return on investment for a little bit of engraving.
Yep, so you basically got $10,000 for engraving on the barrel.
So I personally wouldn't want to fall victim to that, and I wouldn't want any of you guys to either. So I figured you know all the details of these guns, so we can take a look at this one, which is authentic, and I think you can point out to us what to look for on a real Abercrombie & Fitch gun, so we don't get suckered by a fake.
Yep.
All right, let's do it.
So you have not just the Luger there, but actually also its original Abercrombie holster, don't you?
Yes.
That's an interesting configuration of holster.
It's an odd configuration. I've seen several Abercrombie & Fitch Luger holsters, but this is the only one I've seen in this configuration. You can see there's a belt loop on the back, so it would be worn straight down on the side. Gun goes in here, extra magazine goes in there.
Nice. And it's got a pretty cool little Abercrombie stamping in it right up there at the top.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, the most obvious characteristic of these guns is the Abercrombie & Fitch Co. New York, made in Switzerland marking on the top of the barrel.
And that's really the only thing that is really unique about them as far as like a customer or a shooter would have noticed.
Correct.
The caliber and the barrel length. And And then I'm looking at the toggles there, and it looks like that is the 1906 or the new model pattern of Luger.
DWM on the center toggle link.
Yep.
The gun was made by DWM. The barrel was made by Hämmerli. And the first thing you want to see on an Abercrombie & Fitch barrel is that the front sight ramp is stepped back a few millimeters. If you compare it to a DWM barrel, which most of the fakes, they just take a standard DWM barrel and add the marking on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see
it's
the placement of the sight ramp is different.
That's one of those
Sight
things.
base.
Yeah, it's minimal, but boy, once you know to look for it, it's pretty obvious.
Yep.
No.
So that's an important characteristic to look for.
Before we go farther, one thing I noticed there is that gun has a Swiss cross on top of the chamber.
Yes.
That, I presume, is because they were assembled and finished in Switzerland?
Yep. For whatever reason, they use Swiss receivers. I don't know if Abercrombie & Fitch requested that or if that was just because the guns were sent to Switzerland to be finished.
Okay, well, it does look pretty cool, and the Swiss certainly do have a good reputation.
Yep. I would guess that since they were going to Switzerland, that's what appeared on the chamber.
Okay, so what's the next thing? If we have a gun and we see it's got the inscription and the sight checks out, what's the next thing to look at?
Well, these guns are in a certain serial range. This one's 2716I. They were I-range guns. They have a distinctive finish since they were finished in Switzerland. It's a little bit blacker, and it's a little bit of a more matte finish than DWM finish. It just has a really distinctive look that you see these guns that are original, and you just learn what they look like. And if you're used to looking at DWM finish, you would assume that this gun's been reblued. Because it's a slightly different finish, but it's correct for these guns.
Okay.
And like I say, you look for the Hämmerli barrel with that step-back sight base. And the other thing is, these 1906 DWMs, the standard guns had a standard rear frame well. And this is an example. You can see it's flat across the back in here.
Mm-hmm.
But Abercrombie & Fitch requested a reinforced rear frame well. So when you open this gun up, there is a reinforcing ridge across the back.
Awesome. So the one on the left there is the standard 1906 DWM, and the one on the right is the authentic Abercrombie. And
with a reinforced rear frame well.
Right. So it is right up in there. There's a bunch of extra material that you don't have on that one.
Correct. Yeah, it's a reinforcing ridge that goes around the back of the frame well.
And that's going to be pretty hard for someone to add to a gun.
Correct.
And
yeah, they would have to weld it up.
Yeah, and most people aren't going to know to look for that anyway.
Right. People don't know to look for it. And it's not worth the effort to make that change if the victim doesn't know it's supposed to be there.
Well, hopefully we have just thoroughly outed a whole bunch of fake guns.
So there you go, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I think the story behind the Abercrombie & Fitch guns is pretty cool. It's actually a lot happier story than what ended up happening to the brand itself, which turned into an obnoxious clothing brand. At any rate, a big thank you to Brad Simpson for helping out with this video. If you're interested in high-end Lugers, definitely make a point to take a look at his shop at simpsonltd.com or come take a look at the store in Galesburg, Illinois. And as always, thank you very much for watching.